Okay, so I'm going to start today's training. So lovely to meet you. My name is Jacob. I'm a digital outcome specialist here at Forefront. If you didn't know, Forefront is the company that has created eShop. And today we're going to be running through accessibility training. So just to go through the agenda for today, we're going to go over. Oh wait, just to also check. You can hear me, see me. My screen's coming through fine. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so the agenda for today, we're going to go over why accessibility is important. We're going to go over some color contrast tips and different things you can look out for. Going to go over accessible text, why buttons and links. Going to give you some dark mode tips. Then I was meant to do a game, but we're just probably going to do answers in the chat, kind of a quick thing on basically is this bit of content accessible, just to see if you spot the different things that I go over in this training. And then also we're going to demo the accessibility features within eShot itself. So show you what you can use to make your work more accessible and also to what you can do to make the platform more accessible. And then of course, if you have any questions, please save them to the end or feel free to check them in the chat. Since there's only a few of us today, I'm sure I can get around to the questions. So, first of all, to begin, accessibility is not optional or is no longer optional. Um, the Digital Inclusion Act states that councils must do what they can in order to create accessible content. This is why you must know the basics. So today we're going to go over the basics and I'm going to try to put you in the shoes of your audience. So just to give you guys a question to start out, just to see where your mind's at. What percentage of your audience on average would you say has accessibility needs? If you can have a go in the chat and just tell me, what do you think? 5%, 2%, 10%, 50? What percentage of your audience do you think has accessibility needs? I always ask this question. It's always interesting to see what different people think. Thank you, Dean. Um, 65. Okay, that's it's quite high, but it's completely fair. So, so what are class accessibility needs? It's quite a broad term. So it could be anyone who is visually impaired, anyone who might suffer from dyslexia. Basically, they have a condition that affects how they see content, and therefore content might have to be created in a very specific way in order to cater for those needs. So Alana said 65%. And yeah, so I'm just gonna give you, I can see you typing, so I'm gonna give you a second to answer on that one. Thank you, 10%. Okay, so that's actually not bad answers at all. It's quite a hard one to guess. Obviously, it's a massive generalization. It's grouping a lot of different things together. However, on average, 1 in 5 people, or 20%, has some sort of accessibility need in the UK. So, just to put you in the shoes of your audience and to really sort of send the point home of how important some parts of accessibility are, I'm going to show you a picture of some M&Ms. And I'm going to show you 3 more pictures of M&Ms. Now, I want you guys to have a think as to what are the similarities and differences between these 4 photos. The M&M positions and things like that are completely the same, but what do you spot when you look at this photo that's exactly the same in all 4 of them, or what do you see that changes in all 4 of them? So just let you guys think about that. You don't need to answer in the chat, but you can if you want to. I will always appreciate your answers. However, just have a think to yourself, and I will tell you. Because this is a very important key accessibility concept that when you're creating accessible content, this sort of underpins much of what we're going to be talking about today. So, same color circles, different light slash dark. Okay, the letter is always clearly red. Okay, very good spots, actually. Okay, so let me explain. The thing that's the same between each of these is the light and the dark colors, actually. So, Dean is actually slightly the opposite. So the lights and the darks slash the color contrast is the same in each one. As you see, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but if I point over here to the light color, it's the same light color here, here, and here. But if I look at the dark colors, they're also darker on each one. And then what's different between them is the hue, which means the color in essence. So if you look, the orange on here comes out as brown here, comes out as a red here, and like a greenish swampy color here. Um, So basically, what we can learn from this is that these are different conditions in how different people might see color, and we kind of need to figure out a way to cater for the different all these different ways of seeing color. But how do you do that? Basically, you focus on contrast ratios. And I just want you guys to pay close attention to these. So contrast ratios are basically there's a calculation that can happen that gives you a number that tells you the contrast ratio between the foreground and the background. So in essence, between the background of this text and the text itself. So as you see, the text on here is white with a very light gray background. That is considered a low contrast ratio because it's quite hard to see. You might have to squint to see it. And if you have any sort of difficulty seeing the hues and things like that, you're only seeing the lights and the darks in this, and both these colors are quite light. Therefore, it blends into the background, making it very hard to see. And as you see, when we increase the contrast ratio, it just gets easier to see, even to someone who can see color in the completely standard way. It just gets easier to see. It's clearer. It also stands out more. So one thing I want you to pay attention to is the sort of golden ratio is 4.5 to 1 and 7 to 1. Those are two numbers that you should take a note of because 4.5 to 1 is generally what most headings, buttons, things like that have to have a contrast ratio of for WCAG AA. And that would be everything on this side basically passes and everything on this side fails. So this would be considered inaccessible, whereas this would be considered accessible. And I just want you to pay attention to the different colors. It's as much as the colors might seem similar in this one, the contrast, this is closer to a darker color, meanwhile the background is closer to a lighter color. Let's show you more examples. So obviously sad emoji for the left and happy emoji on the right. Color contrast. So as we mentioned, 4.5 to 1 is for most graphical objects, and small body text requires a 7 to 1, so it's much sharper, much clearer contrast ratio. And here is a contrast tracker. So all contrast trackers work in the same way. It doesn't really matter which one you use because they all use the same calculations. And you can basically input the hex rate value of your foreground and your background color. And what this allows you to do is then you get your contrast ratio and you can see if it passes the WCAG standards and basically is it accessible. And then if it says it fails and it isn't accessible, what you can do is you can actually slide these sliders to slightly darken or lighten the color in order to make the color accessible. And then you just see what's the minimum sort of color that I need to use for the background color in order for it to be accessible. I've got more examples. I'm going to put you in the shoes of your audience. Obviously, it's impossible to create content for each different variant of how we see color. So we need to assume that your audience sees in black and white. What this means is in a very similar way to the M&M's example, we are focusing only on the lights and the darks, the highlights and the shadows of sort of the image that we're working on or the bit of content that we're working on. This means the background needs to be a complete opposite type of color to the foreground. So a darker background with a lighter foreground object, button, logo, whatever it is much clearer to see. And when you just flip everything to black and white, you start seeing the different ways people who might see color differently are seeing that post. Look how the logo is completely vanishing in these two, meanwhile the middle one is very clear. These two are inaccessible if you were to test out these ratios. However, this one is very accessible with a very high contrast ratio. And this enables everyone who might see color in a different way to basically see a very clear picture regardless of how they see color. So, another very clear common mistake people make when it comes to accessibility is they don't recolor their social icons. These icons you see on screen are all designed to work on a white background and they work perfectly on a white background. However, when you start to change up the background, let's say these icons are in the footer of your email, footer of your website, what happens then? So let's say your branding colors are green. suddenly you've just made the WhatsApp, the Line, and the WeChat icons completely inaccessible and very hard to see. They're fading out into that background. If it's a black footer and you haven't recolored the logos, suddenly X is harder to see. Threads it gets a bit confusing, and TikTok does. Same goes for the blue for Facebook. Same goes for red for YouTube. It just basically creates an inconsistency between your icons, in which some are fading out and some aren't. So as you see there, is I've got a blue background, and the LinkedIn icon is basically impossible to see there. And if I recolor, I can recolor them by just going up here and selecting on any of these recolored different shapes as well. And if I were to make these icons white, let's say, all of them are suddenly accessible. All of them are one foreground color against one background color, making them very clear to see to my audience. Okay, moving swiftly on. Headings and logical reading order. We need to read the content that we write like a screen reader would. So, are my H tags in the right place? Am I structuring my content logically? And is my alt text in place? And H tags are those things that in emails or on website design that you have to set that basically says this is my heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. Usually that might implicate some different styling being applied to them. But within an email, the base structure that you want to sort of think about are sort of these like folder structure, or I like to call them Russian doll structure, where you don't go, oh, my first heading is my heading 1, my second heading is my heading 2, my third was heading 3, and then heading 4, and go like that, because that's not the correct use of headings. Headings are more used as categoric structure holders. So you go, animals by breed, for example, is my heading 1, that is what my article piece is on. But then dogs, cats, and horses are my categories, let's say. And then in the breakdown of those is the actual breeds of them. And if you start structuring your content like this, you'll see it looks much cleaner, it follows many design rules, and also it's accessible. And to a screen reader, it's like the exact thing they want to see. And obviously in eShot, it's very easy to set these. You just click on your heading and scroll down and pick a heading. As you see, it will instantly resize them in many cases. You can control this in your appearance settings as to what sizes they actually appear to, but you do want to set the correct heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3, as when screen readers read it, they read it in the correct way, it's structured correctly. Right, moving on. I'm going to take a breather, 1 second. So, let's talk about dyslexia. Dyslexia, it comes under the accessibility banner, and we must cater for it in the content that we create. So I'm going to show you an example. Oh, I was meant to ask you a question. God damn it. 1 in 10 people on average have accessibility needs in the UK. Not accessibility, sorry, dyslexia in the UK. Okay? And I want to give you an example of what might not be a good type of content for someone with dyslexia to read. Take a look at the email in front of me. From a design standpoint, there is nearly nothing wrong with this email. It has a very nice image, has great accessibility ratios when it comes to the color contrast. For the most part, I need to check on this red, but I think that just about passes. And overall, the content is structured in a good way. It's a nice email. However, when I showed this email to my girlfriend and also my sister, because so both of them suffer from dyslexia, and I actually wanted to sort of test a real world scenario and say, guys, look at this email, tell me what you think. And what they said to me specifically was this gets visually stressful. Basically, it's kind of a unanimous response of this is visually fatiguing, starts to stress me out. Basically, the content is spaced together in a too close way. So everything starts to sort of blend into one and starts to confuse your brain in a sense, a little bit. And there's a very easy way of fixing this, and that is let the content breathe a little bit. All you need to do is add some spacing. This is the same exact content, same exact email. Have a look how much better the email on the right looks as compared to the email on the left. Not only it looks better, it's also more accessible, it's easier to read, it's easier to understand. And all I did is add some padding settings to each of these. I always thought dyslexia related to words, and I realized layout makes a difference too. Yes, so it's both. It's the understanding of words, and it's also how, like, the structure of the content. you'll see that when you apply different dyslexia fonts, which we'll get into later on around the eShop platform, things can sort of change in the way they look. So it's not just the written content, but it's also the visual of it too. Um, I don't know if you've ever seen in school exams and things like that, some people who might have dyslexia will use a colored sheet to put over the bit of content they're reading. This is because I believe it allows them to focus in on it easier. I'm not too sure fully on how it works, but I've seen that too. Okay. Moving on, obviously you can change in eShop padding. You can add it to everything within SmartEdit. So that you select the container structure block that you're using, and usually can click more settings on those padding on that padding bit, and set the padding for the different section. Also, if you see that little mobile icon over here, if you press that, you end up changing the mobile padding settings. So you can, on mobile, obviously, it's different screen resolutions, different sizes. So sometimes you might not want 40 pixels around each side because then your content will be really squished together in the middle. So you might want to have 20, for example. Okay, moving on. Alt text. We all love this. We all forget to write this when we're designing our emails. However, it is so important. And let me tell you some things that you might have not have known about alt text. So we all think that alt text is just for screen readers, let's say. And that, as much as that's the primary use, it does get used in a few other scenarios. And the scenarios are obviously screen readers. A screen reader, when it comes across an image, will read out the alt text instead of the image, basically letting the person know what should be there. Search engines. If you've ever searched an image on Google Images, alt text plays a massive role in what images you see. Alt text basically tells you what's in the image and helps search engines figure out what should I show to people. So if you're writing content for your website and you want your website to get more clicks, you want your website to rank higher on Google, applying good alt text helps that. It's very good for your ranking scores. And then also broken images or blocked images. We all work within the public sector. I'm sure you've got an email on Outlook before where all the images are blocked and you cannot see anything and there's a question mark absolutely everywhere. Those emails don't look good, don't usually do obviously a good first impression, but everyone's used to blocking blocked images. You usually have to click download images and then they all load in. However, let's say you don't download images, or let's say you can't because your internet's too slow. Being able to hover on that little question mark will show you the alt text that's there, and suddenly you can see what image was meant to be there. So alt text is also very good for people with slow internet, which in many cases in rural areas and stuff like that, it's very common. And obviously within eShop, if something can have alt text, you can set it. Click the block and it'll be on the right hand side. But we're going to get into making your alt text better because it's not just about setting your alt text, it's also about making it descriptive. Let me give you an example about, let's say there was a publication about a fisherman's contest, right? And let's say in that publication, all of the images were of some sort of fish. Here's a carp, here's a pike. However, the alt text just said fish. That would tell you nothing as compared to what's in the image. Wouldn't really give you any benefit to know what's there. You're reading a fishing contest publication. You know there's going to be images about fish. Saying there's a fish or there's a big fish helps in no way. However, if into the alt text you said that is a 90, I don't know the sizing of pikes. Let's say you said that's a 10-kilogram pike or something that was caught in this area in this competition, winning them this first place, let's say. Suddenly that alt text is now a very important descriptive bit of content that supports the text underneath it. So that's basically says in that image, the person got first place, their fish weighed this much, and it took place here. That could be one sentence. However, when you hover over it or when Google reads that to figure out what's in the image, it's suddenly much, much more valuable. Okay, let's talk about buttons. Buttons are king. Hyperlinking text is okay, however, you need to have a good contrast ratio. But in most scenarios, if you can use a button, you should use a button. And also, buttons give you a higher click-through rate. The reason for that is, one, they're clearer, they're much easier to see. A big button is just, it invites people wanting to click it. But not only that, the average thumb size on a mobile is 44 to 72 pixels, depending on how big your hand is. This means that when you're clicking things, if you can see my mouse, if I'm trying to click this link here, I'm going to click if I have a big thumb, let's say, I'm going to click the line above it, I'm going to click next to it, I might click on that, but I might not even select it properly. Having a button allows me that big digital real estate to basically go click, and it's much easier, much better user experience. Use buttons where possible. And obviously, as you can be descriptive of alt text, you can also be descriptive of buttons. Don't say read more, because you will end up having 9 buttons in your email that all say read more or learn more, and that doesn't really serve that much of a purpose. If you read your email like a screen reader would, and you suddenly see read more on every single article, you don't know where that's taking you. If I press, I can't see the email. I can't see what's in front of me. I'm using a screen reader, right? So if I'm seeing read more, I'm going to assume it's to do with the article above, but I also don't know where it's taking me. Where on your website am I going to read more? Is it about to open an article? Is it about to take me to a page where I must fill something in? Is it about to take me to an event? You have no idea. But if you do browse campsites, read our full mission, sign up for the event in London, let's say, it's much clearer, offers people a destination, they can see where they are going to. Use the title of the article itself as the link sometimes. Like that can be useful. Let's say if you're out of ideas, just basically say, let's say the article's about event in London, sign up to our event in London, let's say. Hyperlinks. If you do gotta use a hyperlink and you're not going to use a button, let's say, make sure that it's descriptive. Don't do click here. That's not good. Let's stop doing that. And also make sure it's clickable. Some people don't actually hyperlink a link and they'll put it into their email. You don't want to do that because no one can actually click it and they can copy it out, and it's a tedious process. If you're descriptive with it, visit WebAIM's link text article. Suddenly, that's also a bigger area to click. It's more descriptive and it's accessible. And also, this contrast ratio, this blue has to be a 7:1. It's assuming you're going to be hyperlinking body text. It has to be at least a 7:1 contrast ratio. If it's a heading, it's a 4.5:1. If it's a big heading, I mean, but yeah, make sure to just be descriptive with them. So, within eShop, depending on what version of eShop you have, I believe, there is a email forensics feature which allows you to preview preview your email in over 40 different clients. Obviously, different inboxes will render your email in a different way. If you look at your email on a iPhone, it's going to look very different to a Android device from 5 years ago, let's say. Even though you might be opening it on the same app, they're using different tools within the app to basically open and show your email. So you want to make sure that your email is bulletproof on every single major way of showing your email. How does my email look on the old Outlooks that most of the people within the public sector are still using? How does my email look in dark mode, let's say? How does it look on a mobile device? How does it look on different mobile devices that might have a small screen, large screen? Being able to check all this is very key, and you should be testing your emails, or at least your master design, to make sure that the components you're working with look good across all of them. Okay, color changes. Obviously, emails flip to dark mode. I don't know if you guys knew, but over 60% of users that have used a mobile phone have at some point turned on dark mode and might still be using it to this day. Therefore, most people probably will see your email flipping. Actually, if they see it on a mobile, it'll probably go, I'm going to go into dark mode. All the dark text is going to turn into light text. And this isn't tested enough. People haven't don't check this out enough to make sure that the email looks good. Suddenly, if you have a dark text for your company logo and the email flips into a dark background, oh, what's happened here? We can no longer see the company logo, making it inaccessible, making that part of the email basically useless for whoever's looking at it because they can't see it. So, what can you do? You can apply a little trick that is quite commonly used. However, you only see it when the dark mode flip actually happens. So, I can't use two different logo images, obviously, because it'll show different ones. I can hide and show things on desktop and mobile, but I can't go, if you're using dark mode, then use this image. If you're not using dark mode, use this image. Since we can only use one image, what we can do is we can put an outline around, let's say we had a dark text, we could put an outline around it, which means that when it's in dark mode, as you can see, I can see it, but when the background is in light mode, it is completely invisible. So let's say my logo has a blue background, I'd do a blue outline. And then that when the logo flips, it's always visible. There's always an outline separating it from the foreground and background, making it clear to see. Not ideal. Obviously, we would like us to recolor a logo ideally. However, this is a much cleaner way of doing it than just sticking with it not being accessible. Okay, let's play a game. Usually we have a bit more attendees, but I'll just try to run through this quickly and let's test your accessibility skills, guys. So hopefully you've learned something from me about color contrast in this session. And I'm gonna put you on the spot. So if you could tell me this logo against this background, is this accessible? Is this over a 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio? If you could just stick a yes or no in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. Yes, so Dean says yes, Lana says yes, and Will says yes. Okay, you are correct. Awesome. Let's make it a little bit harder. So that's a 6.01 to 1 contrast ratio. Is this accessible? This is quite an easy one. I'm giving you guys easy ones to begin with. No, 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 obviously. There we go. 1.21. Okay. So now that we understand the gist of the game, let's make it harder. It's fun. What do we think? We have our first yes, we have a second yes, and we have a no. Okay. Actually, it's a 5.14, so it is close. If you were to make this background 10% lighter, it would be very close to not being accessible. However, this just about scrapes it for WCAG AA. Just keep in mind for AAA, which is not the requirement. AAA is like the creme de la creme version of accessibility standards. They're higher ratios. You might need a 7 to 1 ratio to have AAA accessible. However, the standard that we need to go to is AA accessible for now. So we're okay with logos being over a 4.5 to 1 ratio. Right, we have a yellow color with a white logo. What do we think? Yeah, no, no, and no. You guys are correct. That's a no. Okay, now let's do a hot pink color. This is where it gets hard because the very high saturation ones start tricking your mind a little bit. The longer you look at it, the more confused you'll be. We have a yes, we have a no, and we have a yes. Told you. Okay, so this actually is not accessible. However, I was very cheeky. This is by 1% not accessible. So I'm sorry. However, this is how things you need to look out for. This would fail WCAG AA. This would mean that content that you published is not accessible. However, it looks accessible to the majority of people because it's very close to be. Right, now this one's a bit harder. So what I've done here is I have, there's a darker gradient around this side. There's a lighter gradient around this side. Got you thinking now, eh? We have a yes, we have a and we have a yes. Okay. So, I'm gonna say okay, so it's actually a yes. And it's an 8.4 8 to 1 ratio, which is the ratio if you were to test a white foreground color against the background on this side. And then obviously it's a gradient. So it goes from one color to the other, which means if this color is accessible, which is a 5.9 to 8, the entire range from here to here is going to be within this bracket. As long as it's over a 4.5, it's accessible. So yes, this actually would work. In many cases, people would say, no, you can't put it on a background, or you can't put it on the gradient background. And that's actually false. You completely can. You just need to make sure that each part of where this color is going through in the background against there is accessible. Okay, now we have this teal color. However, as you notice, it gets darker around here, and it gets lighter around here. No, no, and no. Okay, it would be correct. So it starts off accessible up here. If the logo is moved up here, this would work. Down here, oh, it starts fading out. So if you imagine if you made this black and white again, top bit of this would be easier to see than the bottom bit of this. And that is basically it for most of the presentation. I've got a demo to show you guys in a second, so I'll do that. But yeah, put yourselves in the shoes of others. It's always important to see how your audience would be seeing the content. And obviously, it's a massive portion of your audience. 20% of your audience potentially having an accessibility need is a 1 in 5. That's a massive amount of people. Obviously, we do have all the resources and things available to you to make sure that you are creating accessible content. It's available on our website, and we'll also be sending out in the follow-up after this. And we also have some blogs and some different structures that you can use to help you keep creating accessible content. We'll also send out these slides after, so you'll get all of this as well. There is some of the different blogs on our website. And I will show you some of the eShop features now. One thing I want to mention before we move on to the demo is your audience will actually appreciate you for creating accessible content and making an effort. Meanwhile, your audience will not appreciate you if you haven't made an effort. It's the perfect way to create a good first impression. Imagine you're someone with accessibility needs and there is perfect alt text. Everything is as accessible as possible. You look at that and you go, yes, that's different to most of the content I see recently. And you start to appreciate the publishers of their content more. Meanwhile, if they haven't made an effort and they've done the complete opposite, you look down that. You'd be like, oh God, they haven't catered at all. That's dreadful. So it's a key thing to create a good first impression by creating accessible content. Okay, now, oh, I went to my thank you screen. I'm going to do a demo of some accessibility things within eShop. This part is usually done by my colleague Harry. However, he's currently at an event in Central Bedfordshire demoing this in person. So I'm going to do his part for the first time, and I hope it goes well. So here goes. Okay. In eShop, when you log in, you'll see at the top here, there's this little accessibility icon. What you can do is you can click on this. Can I zoom in? Yes, I can. Nice. I think that will be good. And let me just go full screen. Cool. So this is the part of the platform that allows you to make eShop more accessible for the users using eShop. So this part doesn't affect the email sent out at the end. This part only affects the people using eShop. So let's say one of your staff members might have trouble seeing different contrast ratios. You click this, suddenly all the contrast ratios become much more clearer to them. There's different modes in here as well. Different ways of seeing contrast will utilize different versions of this. You can also make it highlight links for you to make it more accessible. The text can be bigger, so it increases all the fonts across the website. The text spacing, so as we mentioned with that dyslexia, having a more spaced out content sometimes helps. So this is all settings that are customizable, and you can pair these up with each other to do different versions of it, so your users can use the platform in the most accessible way possible. And so if animations cause any sort of troubles, you can hide animations. And remember that dyslexia friendly font I mentioned? Take a look at this. So this is very interesting to me because a friend of mine called Jack, actually, who sits next to me in the office with an eShop, uses this on a regular basis. And this font to me is crazy. However, it's like it's hard to see like how this font works, sort of thing. Like it's very confusing. It changes it in a very strange way. However, to him, this is amazing. It makes the platform so much easier to see, and he's used it ever since this was shown to him. So to actually see how different fonts might impact people is very, very interesting. And you can also make your cursor bigger and change up the line height if you'd like to. So that's eShop accessibility features for the users of eShop. Now let's talk about for you when you're creating your content, things that can help you make accessible content within eShop, and then obviously accessible content for your audience too. This email in front of me, as you see, I have an inaccessible heading. This heading is using this color, and it would fail the accessibility contrast ratio checks. And just to show you the power of eShop, we have created an accessibility checker within eShop that points this out to you. So as you see here, I've got 5 instances within my email that are failing contrast ratios. Keep in mind, this will not be able to scan within the inside of an image. So if you put a logo over a non-accessible bit, it won't pick it up. However, this will be able to scan your buttons, your text, your links, things like that. And so as you see, I can click highlight here, and it suddenly puts a box around everything that is inaccessible within my email, basically saying, change me. I'm not accessible. I will fail accessibility ratios if I'm not changed. And so now let me just quickly demo to you guys how we can fix this. Let's say I was to copy this contrast ratio, and now let's go to here. If I click details over here, it will take me to a contrast ratio checker, actually. And if we look back on our email, it's against the white background, so I'm using this text color against the white background. So my background color is white, so just go to here, set it to white. Then my foreground color is that color. So if, as you see, fail, 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 it does a 2.5 accessibility ratio. Let me zoom that in so it's easy for you guys to see. If I was to adjust that lightness color, as you see, if I was to get to there, it now passes AA for large text. If I was to make that pass for small text, it now passes there too. And then obviously if I keep going, get this passes across the board. So let's say I wanted to use now this color because it passes everything and it's very clear. This is going to be accessible to everyone and I want to use it. So I'll copy the hex ratio on here, go over here and to the text color, and now I can change it. Now if I write accessible heading here instead, if you see, once the eShop saves this, I get to preview, and let this refresh. Suddenly it's no longer highlighted. My amounts of instances have gone down to 4 instead of 5, and this is now considered an accessible heading, which is awesome. Moving on, let's say we needed some accessible alt text. Okay, it's a laptop on the screen. I actually designed this image. However, if you see eShop laptop on the screen with an email design popping out of the screen is basically what's happening on the image. There's not really any other value this image adds, and all of that is perfectly encapsulated within that alt text. Meaning, if, as you see, I'm hovering on this. I don't know if you can see if the screen share is capturing this, but there says eShop on the laptop in that little black box on my screen. That's exactly how it will show up to people where the image doesn't load. And also, let's talk about the heading structure. So I don't know if you remember, I was talking about the H1, H2, H3, H4, and the different Russian dolls that you sort of have to categorize things by. And here we have the exact example of what I showed off. So animals by breed is our, let's say, article, our H1, let's say. And then our H2 is our different types of animals, so dogs. And then our H3 is the different breeds. As you see, the font size is going down, the color is changing, and then creating this visual hierarchy. And the hierarchy makes sense from a categoric perspective. So I'm looking at that and going, okay, then like imagine this was set to a H3 instead. And the color was changed to the exact color as this, and the font size was changed the same as that. That wouldn't really make sense. You'd go dogs, golden retrievers, cockapoos. It's it crosses into the different categories. It's one's a category of the other, basically. However, if you were to do H2, that's the correct structure, and that's all good. Social icons as well. Here's my inaccessible social icons. Let's make these accessible. So I could recolor them to make them white, let's say, and say one of the rounded ones like that because I like rounded icons. I could also make them bigger as well. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend maybe making it that big, but you can play with the size. If you also need to add any social icons in here, we have some here. And if you want to do a custom image, you can do that there too. But yeah, we would obviously not be doing 64 because that is a bit insane, unless you're doing one or two icons in like a different use case. I maybe wouldn't use 64 for in the footer, but I might use 64 if I'm just trying to point it out to my Facebook group, let's say within the email. And actually, I believe that is everything. Obviously, you can when you get to the preview, you can preview on mobile, and if you send yourself a test email, depending on what version of eShot you have, you'll be able to preview it within email forensics as well. Just to show you where that would be. If you go under analytics and go to email forensics, you'll be able to go into here and you'll be able to see all the different live and test sends that you have done at the top, and you'll be able to select the different email. Then when you go to previews, you can select on the different previews which ones you want to request, and after about 5 minutes, you'll see what the email will look like on those. This area does take a second to load sometimes, and I am streaming, so it is usually I'll preload this if I was to show it off. However, it's over there, and that will give you that part where you can show off the different parts of look at it in different rendering clients. And that is basically it for my training. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. It was quite nice having a small amount of people actually. We get to have a chat. Um, I hope you learned something new. We'll be sending you guys the slides out after the meeting. Thank you for the clap emoji. Really appreciate you guys. Please feel free to invite your teammates and friends onto the next ones in case they want to learn something. They can learn something new, and obviously send out the link of the recording to anyone. It'll be on YouTube by the end of today. So thank you all so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time on this one. No problem at all. Will, there'll be a full recording sent to you as well, so you'll be able to see everything you missed out on. So do not worry. And obviously, we do have other training sessions as well, so make sure to register to those on our website. So thank you guys so much for your time, and I wish you a good rest of your day. Bye bye, guys.